Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to talk about something that I have mentioned in passing many times in many videos, but something that I have never dedicated a full video to, and that is going to be my favorite middle grade fantasy novels that I feel like transcend their age categorization. I have talked a little bit in various videos about my enjoyment of middle grade and YA. I enjoy almost everything. I love all kinds of genres, all kinds of age categories. But if you look at middle grade and YA, I think that for fans of classic fantasy, there's actually a lot more that probably appeals about classic middle grade stories than about your more mainstream YA fantasy that's being published right now. And I wonder sometimes if some of those really beautiful middle grade stories get lost because people feel like they don't like YA and they don't want to read in an age category that is, not to their particular tastes. Now, just to clarify, if you don't like middle grade stories, that's fine. This is not me being like, you are wrong because you choose not to read middle grade. This is me being like, if you are going to give a chance to any middle grade stories and you value my opinion or my taste in fantasy, please make it one of these ones, because in my opinion, these are the best of the best and I love them all. These are all 5-star reads for me. These are some of my favorite books of all time, and I think that you are missing out if you have not at least given some of them a try. And I think there are 6 that I have on the list, and I will start with the one that everybody knows, the one that many people have read, and if you have not, you should, and if you have, you should reread it. And that is The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. So one of my favorite books, my introduction to fantasy. This was the book my dad read me when I was 5. This is what got me hooked on the fantasy genre, a book that I will never stop loving. And I reread it a fair amount. The last time I reread it was when I read it to my kids last year, which was a wonderful experience. They both really liked it. They enjoyed different parts of the story, and it was really fun to see them fall in love with it as well. And we bought a little Hobbit ornament for our Christmas tree at the end of the year, and it was really nice. I'm hoping that will be a good memory now whenever we take it out and decorate the tree every year. But The Hobbit is the story of Bilbo Baggins, a hobbit who goes on an adventure. And unlike The Lord of the Rings, which is a longer, more epic fantasy story, this is an adventure tale. This is a middle grade story. It talks about Bilbo. It takes place in a series of interconnected adventures that do build up to kind of an overarching plot, but there are a series of adventures or misadventures that Bilbo gets himself into and then has to figure his way out of. The language is a little more stylized than a lot of children's literature is right now, but definitely accessible, easy to understand. It has a lyrical style, and there are a lot of poems and songs that are interwoven that are really fun for kids. My kids, there's a scene with spiders in this book, and there's a song that Bilbo sings. They love it. They still sing it all the time and throw out lines from it when they want to, get on each other's nerves. So it's just a joy to read. If you have not read The Hobbit, or if you didn't like Lord of the Rings and so you thought, I'll stop there, you should really give The Hobbit a chance. I have heard that recently the audiobook that was put out with Andy Serkis narrating The Hobbit is phenomenal. So if you haven't read it, or if you're looking for your first reread in many years, that might be a good place to start. I have not personally listened to it, but I think it was Jimmy who just listened to it and told me that it was so good. So there might be a reread coming along for me at some point as well, because I think that would be worth listening to for sure. The second book that I want to talk about is another one that has gotten a lot of airtime on the channel because it is another one of my favorites of all time, and that is Watership Down by Richard Adams. The Hobbit is the first fantasy story that was read to me. Watership Down is the first, let's say, adult, because this could be for adults, or I guess it's a higher reading level than your standard children's fantasy, but it's the first one that I ever read. I read Watership Down when I was 7, and there were definitely parts of it that were really dark and maybe I shouldn't have been reading. And there were a couple of times when I had to go to my parents and be like, this just happened, and my dad would be like, it's okay. But it is a story of family and friendship and, again, adventure. There's always that core of adventure in middle grade that feels so happy and so freeing. It makes you feel like you're a kid again. But Watership Down it's a story about anthropomorphized rabbits. So if you don't like stories that are from animal point of view, then just don't read it, because then you'll hate it and I'll be sad. But if you don't mind reading stories that are from an animal's point of view, this is my favorite ever. It is one of my favorite books, probably my favorite book of all time. I cannot be the least bit objective about it. It means so much to me. But I think for anyone who wants to recapture that feeling of falling in love with fantasy when you were younger, Watership Down is the perfect book to do that. It has a solid story. There's a lot of in-world mythology. Like, the rabbits have their own belief system. They have their own deity that they worship. They have their own folklore and their own folk tales that help them at various times along the path. It's a very in terms of morality, it's very black and white. Like, there are good guys, there are bad guys. But getting to see how the rabbits kind of maneuver themselves in those situations is still, I think, enjoyable as an adult. I hosted a buddy read on the channel where I just kind of popped in and chatted with people as they were reading through it, and I think most people liked it. I'm not sure if you read it for the first time as an adult, if it will mean as much to you as if you had read it for the first time when you were a child, but I don't think that anybody hated it when they read it. So I feel confident recommending it to most people to at least check it out and see what you think. And then if you like it, come and tell me, and if you don't, you can still tell me, but I might be sad about it. So this is one that definitely I think you should give a try. The third book on the list is another classic one, but it's actually probably more sci-fi or sci-fantasy, and that is A Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine L'Engle. This is actually a longer series, but A Wrinkle in Time can be read as a standalone if you only want to read one of them. And these books are centered around a girl named Meg and her family. She's got, I believe, 3 brothers. They're twins, and then she has a younger brother, Charles Wallace. And it's a mixture of... It's really interesting because you get to explore ideas around biology and science. Meg's parents are scientists, and there's a lot about space and time travel and your place in the universe. There's a lot of really big ideas for a book that is written for children. They won't be difficult for you to understand if you're an adult, but I think that there's enough there that it makes it really worthwhile if you're reading them as an adult. This was probably my favorite series when I was a kid, not counting the big ones that were releasing, like Harry Potter, that came out over years. But like for a series that had been completed when I was a child, I went back and reread it so many times. I absolutely loved it. It was unlike anything else that I had read at that time. And if you're a fantasy lover who also enjoys sci-fi, then I would absolutely recommend this one. Read it alone, read it to your kids, just give it a try, because not many people talk about it on BookTube. I haven't talked about it with many people, but it is definitely one of my all-time favorites. Next on the list is going to be another classic, and that is A Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula K. Le Guin. Probably, other than The Hobbit, which I think everybody has heard of and most people have read, if you're going to read as a fantasy fan, if you're going to read one book on this list, it should probably be A Wizard of Earthsea. And once you read A Wizard of Earthsea, which follows the main character Ged, who is a magic user or is training to be a magic user, he goes to a magic school to be instructed on how to put his powers to use, and along the way he has to struggle with some darkness. I'm trying to be very vague because it's a very short book and I don't want to spoil anything. But once you read it, if you are a fantasy fan, you will see the influence that it has had on so many series, from Harry Potter, if we're talking about the very mainstream fantasy, to The Name of the Wind, if you are looking for things that are more lyrical and introspective. There are so many fantasy authors who have been influenced by Ursula K. Le Guin, and it's just a beautiful book. It's very quick, very easy to get through. In terms of accessibility, it's not as straightforward in writing style as other middle grade works and as the other works on this list, but it is worthwhile. I actually have only read the first one. I would love to I know there's a beautiful illustrated bind up of all of them that I probably will get at some point, but I wanted to read the first one just because I know how influential it was on fantasy as a whole, and I was really glad that I read it. I think this is a favorite of Philip, and you should absolutely give it a chance. Another classic work that does not get almost any exposure, I heard about it through Neil Gaiman, is the book Archer's Goon by Diana Wynne Jones. So tons of people know about the book Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones because it was animated into a film by Studio Ghibli. And it's a beautiful film. Lots of people love that movie. Many people know that it's based on a book, and I think a lot of people love the book as well. But Archer's Goon, which is by the same author, is so enjoyable. I read it for the first time, I think it was last year. I think it was early last year and not late 2020. But regardless, it was recently and I loved it. As I said, it was a recommendation from, I think, Neil Gaiman's Twitter. He had been talking about like his favorite book that he read to his kids when they were young, and it was Archer's Goon. And it's really hard to explain what it is about because you should go into it knowing nothing and let it surprise you. But ostensibly, it is about the children of an author who has writer's block. And they're targeted by a goon. One day they come home from school and there's a goon waiting in their kitchen. And he wants something from their father. And he's not sure, or they're not sure what he wants. And even their father's not really sure what he wants. And they have to track down, or I guess figure out the reason why this goon has infiltrated their family. And this leads them into kind of an underworld of magical or powered individuals who live in their city and who control various facets of the city. It's a very strange book, and it takes time for it to all come together, but it is whimsical, it is bizarre, it is absurd, it is so funny. There are parts that made me laugh out loud. And it's really heartwarming. It is everything that I love about middle grade. Not enough people have read this book. It's even really hard to buy. I can't buy a copy in Canada anywhere that I can find, at least. I will need to order in a copy, I think, from the Book Depository, but it is worth it. It's so, so good. I want to reread it right now. Like every time I talk about it, I just feel like I'm grinning because I liked it so much and it took almost no time to get through it. It was short, but it is so enjoyable. So please, if you're going to read a middle grade book from this list, then go out and get Archer's Goon because I need more people to talk with me about it. So please do it. And then the last book on the list is the most modern of the middle grade that I have on here, but it captures that kind of timeless, whimsical quality in a way that other modern middle grade that I have read has not managed to do for me yet. And that book is The Girl Who Drank the Moon by Kelly Barnhill. This, I believe, won a Newbery Honor Award or was at least nominated for the Newbery Medal. And it's phenomenal. It is a story of a witch who lives in the woods outside of town. And this town selects a child every so many years to be sacrificed to the witch. And they believe this is how they are going to keep their town safe. So the town itself has this kind of feeling, this overarching feeling of sorrow and bitterness because they know that one of their children is going to be selected to sacrifice to this witch. Unknown to the town, or unbeknownst to the town, the witch who lives in the woods is actually a very kind witch. She has no idea why these children are being sacrificed, and she picks them up and she feeds them starlight and she brings them to families in other towns who are looking for children so that they can be raised and be safe and be happy. And one night she goes out to find a child who has been sacrificed and accidentally feeds her moonlight instead of such starlight. And that imbues her with magical powers. So the witch knows that she can't give this baby to another family because they won't know what to do with her. And she decides to raise her as her own. So she becomes kind of the grandmother to this baby. And then she has magical companions that become family members or pseudo-siblings to this baby. And it's about their lives, about found family and love and sorrow. And so we get kind of dual perspectives. We get the perspective of this family with the witch and the young girl, and then we also get the intermingling perspectives of the people who live in the town and their thoughts and what they want to do and whether or not they want to change the status quo. And it is sad and haunting, but it's beautiful and it feels classic in, like I said, in a way that many of those older middle grade stories do. But Again, this is one that I'd love to reread. I read it relatively recently, like within the last couple of years, and I just enjoyed it so much. But those are my recommendations. Like I said, I think if you are someone who loves classic fantasy, if you love soft magic systems and a feeling of wonder and that kind of whimsical undertone in stories, I think any of these works of middle grade would be for you. I would love, if you don't typically pick up middle grade, put one of these on your TBR and then tell me about it. If you have read any of these books, I would love to know your thoughts on them. And I would like an opportunity to discuss a little bit of middle grade because it doesn't come up that often. And I think there's a lot of overlap in terms of enjoyment for people who like adult fantasy and these classic middle grade stories. But that is it. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and I will see you with another one soon. Bye.